Now we have our first presentation of the day. Please welcome Tomer Afek to the stage. Tomer is the CEO and co-founder of Spacemesh, and he's on a mission to build the fairest possible decentralized economic infrastructure. He's going to discuss social innovation with us. Tomer? Prior to Spacemesh, Tomer was the CEO of Convert Media that was acquired by Tabula in 2016.
Thank you. One, two, hey. Very nice to be here. It's very different than the way things looked when it just got started. We were a bunch of punks that wanted to say fuck you to the men. And now we are, say, like an industry that is really talking about business models and stuff like that. But initially, when this industry got started, it had an idea that the game, the whole game that we are playing together in order to get our, mutual needs met is non-ideal, and we can play better game. And I have been since the past 6 years working in those veins of creating a new social order, a new social infrastructure, a new social operating system. And I would like to take you through the journey that I've been through really quickly. I think to begin with, it's very important to notice that we are inside a period which is to be referred to as the meta crisis. Meta crisis means that we have a bunch of crises which are, weaved together, one into the other, and you can't just decide, okay, I care about global warming and I'm going to fix only that. Okay, that's stupid. This problem is related to a ton of other problems, and any change in any of the elements in the system leads to a change in the whole system. This is a complex system, and yeah, I mean, one of the obvious things to notice is that none of the tools that we're currently using, say, companies, markets, governments, institutions, none of those is capable of dealing with, basically complex problems. And the mere fact that they nonetheless insist on trying to fix it with these tools is creating what we can see now. So when I say, by the way, meta crisis, I would like for you to imagine a vantage point from which you could see all the problems and identify what is the one next move, the single one next move that you'd want to do in order to resolve the entire space of crisis. I think this slide is probably the one that you should take away. The reason this status that we're at is catastrophic is not only because the problems are important and our tool set isn't able to solve it, which makes them wicked, but also in effect the technology is rising in power exponentially. As you know, this means that every year we make more progress than in all the time up to this point combined. And this means that our technology is becoming more and more powerful in a ridiculous rate. But our personalities, our hearts, our compassion, our love is not growing at the same rate as our technology. And all of this is really arriving at the point of a crisis. And if you ask me, the most important thing as of now is to learn to play a different game together, which is not the original capitalism 1.0. So where the fuck do we start to do that, right? I mean, it's like so many things. And so in complexity science, there is something called co-evolution, whereby you evolve two things simultaneously, and the new affordances that are being created in that evolution feed back to one another, and they create something like a spiral upwards. So this process is the only process that, even in a theoretic sense, stand a chance to basically save us. And we can't improve only the social institutions. We can't improve only the humans and leave the institutions as they are. We must go through a loop of increasing the humans, meaning educating them better, and then giving them more social tools, more civic capacities. With these higher education, and the combination of those two, I believe, is where we would want to start. I think that the main idea to be understood, and my friend Dr. Avital has taught me this for the first time, government cannot succeed. It's not like they are bad. It's just the illusion that these kind of problems can be even potentially solved from in a top-down fashion is mistaken. You don't know what's going on at the edges. You are very much disconnected from the real life, real problems, and challenges that needs to be solved. So only something like self-organizing hubs that are linking upwards and create one gigantic mesh network, and the interaction of the individual players is basically creating a bottom-up emerging maps that tells you something that you couldn't have deducted from your information thus far. So, yep, what I'm arguing that both from a, say, a robustness standpoint and less fragility, both from an accuracy and from knowing where to spend your dollars, from any given parameter that you would want to examine, this type of structure would do better with the citizens as opposed to a centralized top-down government. As I'm saying, the very first ingredient which is necessitated here is something like a very robust, very decentralized, and very permissionless infrastructure on which, on this robustness, you can now build many things: ad hoc centralized organization, decentralized long-term evolving organizations. You can do all that, but I guess the more important part here is the education part. And I'm going to say something quite controversial now, but I think the schools are toast. I think the whole idea of schooling, putting kids at exactly the same age, with no kids that are above them or below them, and teaching them something which was originated 30 or 40 years ago, can no longer bring people to the level of abstraction, level of systemic thinking, level of, let's even dare to say, meta-systemic or paradigmatic thinking, which we'd want to evolve with people. So none of the schools can provide that. And big part of the action is going to be about that, about the additional bottom-up emergent forms of education and developing humans to a point where they are the best version of themselves, rather than teaching them something which is how to solve a past problem, rather than teaching them something about the past, you would want to make them the best version of themselves. And then when they encounter this new problem that we don't yet know of, they will know what to do as a result of their education. I think if you want to think about this society, this new society, and give it a name, I would choose the name meta-modern. As you know, postmodern period that began with Friedrich Nietzsche was all about shitting on modern, right? It was like, oh, you modern people, you didn't know what you were doing, all of you are wrong. But none of this was productive, none of this was going anywhere. It was all about why modern was wrong. And I would argue that the meta-modern is the next evolution after ending to critique the modern and trying to build something more generative out of this kind of mistakes. And yeah, meta-modern to my mind is the understanding that nothing is. Nothing is. Everything becomes. Everything is a process. Everything is in basically transition, becoming something. And when you are able to do this, when you are able to make half a move, like I think was said before me about meta. So meta is definitely the big word here. Meta means that as opposed to trying to solve a specific problem, I make a half a move out. I try to understand what are the forces that led to this problem. How can we categorically change those forces so they would point into a different direction? And how can we ongoingly, iteratively do that in a fashion that is not dogmatic, not committed to any given dogma, not to the left, not to the right, but rather truly seeking higher forms of equilibrium. And what's missing for humanity to make this gigantic leap forward? So, yeah, I'm just trying to argue here that the vast majority of what I expect to see is a qualitative upgrade as opposed to a quantitative upgrade. The ability to integrate, you know, we, it, into something which is more than the, you know, reduced version that we are now. I think that we will start to see this dramatic increase in human capacity. And basically, if you consider what is novel here, the very first thing to notice from the birds, right, from the birds that are doing their murmuration, is that there is a way which humans have lost, but is very profound, which is coordinated yet decentralized, correct? So if you think about the birds, if you think about the birds in murmuration, you would notice that none of the birds is the boss of the other birds. None of the birds is like the conductor, which is telling the other birds how to fly. There is something like atmospheric pressure. The atmospheric pressure is changing. Upon such a change, a spontaneous reaction by the birds themselves is appearing. So the birds are actually dancing, and God is actually their DJ. And if you think about it in this fashion, you see how much we humans don't know how to do that. We don't know how to be decentralized, yet coordinated in a fashion that we respond, or at least we didn't know until very recently. And this is very much what is novel here. And the other thing which is novel, and again, I'm very much pounding on the second thing as the main thing. Players are doing what they do from, you know, pity incentives, and then the image that is emerging on top and constantly changing is the image that contains the novel information that you're looking for. I will finish with presenting the field in which we will about to do the innovation over the next, I'd say 5 decades. And this tool, or this playing field, let's call it, is none of those 3 modes of coordination, which is the, you know, the group or the tribe. The group or the tribe is really awesome. I love this mode of operation, capable of doing more than anything else. However, even world-class teams kind of, you know, suffocate at, say, 100 people, and this tool has limited scalability, optionalities. The institutions, which we've already bashed enough for being, you know, unable to update, one size fit all, very much detached from the people they're trying to help, and markets. Yeah, markets, you know, one thing I will take 1 minute to say about markets is that markets are very much possessed with this thing called the Moloch problem. Moloch problem is basically a conspiracy without a conspirator. Okay, so meaning Moloch is a very famous thing. I'm really recommending everybody that doesn't know it to get into that, but basically, Moloch is the question, if everybody hates the current system so much, who perpetuates it? Why is it sucking so badly if everybody hates it? And the reason for that is that there is this you know, illusion that humans have, that there is a godlike point of view from which you can see everything and improve everything, but the players on the ground, in order to flip from this state to the improved state, sometimes need to go through unbearable risk, which they will never go through, and such a state transition, which is to the benefit of everybody, are being basically held back. as a result of Moloch. And if we are to do better, if we are to generate more inclusive, more basically, multicultural kind of frames, they could not possibly be done in this kind of a playing field. Rather, instead, what we need, and I will do it quickly just for the sake of respecting the time here, we need a self-sovereign identity. Quite simply, only I can basically decide if I want to appear as a pseudo-anonymous or as my real self. And second important tool which Spacemesh is working on all day and all night is basically the ledger part. This is basically what will support all this change, societal change, is our ability to create some of our own money and to start with options. When I was young, I didn't have anything. I was really afraid. I was taking risks, both emotionally and health risk, just to make it to the next phase. I think at the age of abundance, this is no longer needed. We no longer need to put children through this nightmare. So, and lastly, there's rule of law, whereby there is no one law, but whatever law the community owner is choosing, if you want to play with the community, you play with them in the rules, and then both, solving of problem and jurisdiction and all that stuff is being solved. So this is just from Biology's network state book, which is, I would say, the modern replica of Neil Stevens before here. So I recommend strongly all experiment with online communities and with different cultures than the one that you know. And all this is happening in Spacemesh, our layer 1 blockchain, which you are very much welcome to come and innovate social frontiers with us. Thanks so much for listening. And